Congregation Kol Ami's Religious School Parent Network. We're delighted to bring this special programming on how to navigate the college admissions process to our religious school community. Fellow congregant and educational advisor Erica Papir has graciously agreed to organize tonight's workshop with her company Smart City Kids that has for 20 years successfully guided parents and students through the complex college application process. Thank you for putting yourself on mute. We are also grateful to have Danielle Holman, a college advisor at Smart City Kids, to speak this evening as well. Tonight's workshop will be recorded and available on the Smart City Kids public YouTube channel for those interested to catch a replay or for those that could not attend the live session. And we will also be sending the link when it's ready throughout our community. If you'd like the opportunity to rename yourself or opt out of showing your video, although I think a lot of people have already, please do so now. Okay, thank you. And I'll hand it over to Erica.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Charlene. So I think everyone has put the grade of their child in the chat box, but if you have not already done so, that would be really helpful. So welcome to the Smart City Kids workshop. My name is Erica Papir, and as Charlene mentioned, I am a Kol Ami congregant. So thank you so much to Kol Ami for inviting us to present tonight. I'm also a parent. I have a daughter in the 6th grade and a son in the 2nd grade. So I'm not quite there with college, but I know it will come before I know it. So before we dive into our workshop, I just wanted to briefly introduce Smart City Kids to Kol Ami, so you know that we are here if you ever need us for support in any area. So as Charlene said, for the past 20 years, Smart City Kids advisors have guided parents and students through the admissions process for entrance into all grades, starting in nursery school with early childhood, the little ones, going all the way through college and including special education.
Great.
We work, if everyone could make sure they're on mute, that would be really helpful. Thank you. We work with families throughout the New York area, as well as across the globe, for families who are relocating to help them identify the right community for their family. We also have clients who are schools, and we support them with transitions in leadership, admissions, marketing, strategic planning, or anything else they may need. In addition, we work with a variety of organizations to provide workshops on various parenting topics, as well as admissions and financial aid. And we also support corporations when they recruit new talent by helping them to find schools for the relocating family. Lastly, all of our advisors offer parenting sessions where we discuss parenting and education-related topics. Parenting is complicated under good circumstances on a normal day, and then you layer in a global pandemic, and it's just a whole new level of complication. So if you ever find yourself in need of support, we are here for you. We also have a really wonderful group of tutors who support students of all ages and all abilities if they need help with any subject area or executive function skills. So you can feel free to reach out to me if you need information further on any of those areas of our work. So I'm honored to pass it along to my most impressive colleague, Danielle Holman. Danielle will present for around 45 minutes and then leave some time for questions at the end. So if you have questions along the way, I'll be keeping a close eye on the chat box. You can enter them there and I will pose them to Danielle at the end of her presentation. So Danielle, I pass it along to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica, and thank you all for having me this evening. So as she shared, my name is Danielle Holman. I am an educational or college consultant with Smart City Kids, and I'm really excited to share the content of navigating the college admissions process with you. Our agenda for this evening, so I'll do a brief introduction of myself and my background, how I got into this work to help really you understand what I can bring in terms of information to you and understanding this college access process, which is challenging. I'll talk a little bit about some educational psychology work as well. So we'll go through the funnel. So what are the 4 years of high school? what does that look like from a college perspective. So we'll look at the academic skills that students should be focusing on in the 4 years of high school, as well as the executive function. We'll also do a deep dive into college admissions. I know that's probably top of for folks. I'm so sorry if everyone could mute their cameras just to make sure that we can all hear, that would be wonderful. Sorry about that. All right, thank you. In terms of that next bullet, college admissions in the era of COVID, I think that is top of mind for all of us, and it's still ongoing, but I'd love to provide the most up-to-date information I can to help you understand what it's looking like in these uncertain times. And then I'll provide a few resources for families as y'all navigate this college process. And then, like Erica said, I'll leave the last remaining minutes for Q&A. So I'll dive into my introduction. So a little bit about me. I'm born and raised in New York City from the Bronx, and I went to Princeton for undergrad and worked there for several years as an admissions officer. After that, I got my master's in education at Harvard Graduate School for Education, and then went on to be the director of admissions of a college success program called the TEAC Fellowship, which is based in New York City. And so, that is my resume, my background. But what I think is also really important for me as I introduce myself is my identity as a woman, a young woman who was raised by a single parent. And so my dad supported me through college, well, from birth through college. And this is a picture of us. So my first day at college and then my graduation. And I bring that up because I think certainly the college process is all about the student, but it's also about the families as well. And the work that you all are doing right now just to learn about how you can support your child, even if they don't always express it, they will appreciate it. And so just wanted to take a moment to honor the time that you're taking to really support your children. I know that I really appreciated the sacrifices and the opportunities that my dad made for me. And that's part of the reason that I am committed to this work, to provide resources and knowledge for families and students as they navigate the college process, to think about what they want to do and what they want to be when they grow up. I think that's a question that students are asked from the time they can really talk. They're very young, but the way they understand that and how it becomes attainable and achievable changes over time. And so I love, working with students at really different ages and understanding, how do I start to plan for my future? So I will dive in by setting expectations. So I think, and intentions rather. So I think it's really important for the college process, not just to be about, what's the best school that a student can get into, but really thinking about purpose, balance, and a sense of self. So how are students able to get excited about a career path, and also just about their adult journey? Is there balance that they can think about? How do I balance my academic strengths, my extracurricular interests, and my personal strengths? What types of disciplines will I be able to really display what my strengths are? We want our students to really think about that so that it can be a student-led process. And that's really the most effective one, the one in which the student feels like they are in the driver's seat and they're really guiding that college process and that journey. So we have witnessed the other side of that, burnout in competitive environments when students don't have that sense of balance. They don't feel like they're in the driver's seat, and that leads to a lack of sense of self or sense of direction. So we really think what's sustainable and what's meaningful is for the students to be really excited and interested from the very beginning in this process. So I'll talk about the funnel. So all of the information from 9th grade through 12th grade goes into, the college application. This funnel, while, a good infographic in one way, it's not quite proportional. So of course, it's not that the 9th grade year is so much more important than what's going on in the 12th grade year. However, the skills and the foundation that is set in 9th grade does funnel into all of that, all of what the admissions officers are going to review. What I think is also really important is to think about how the skills academically and the executive functioning skills are built over time throughout these 4 years. So it's not just about 11th grade, 12th grade. It's not just about grades, and it's not just about test scores, but really the full picture of what's going on in those 4 years is how an admissions officer is going to evaluate an application. And so I'm going to go through what students should focus on in these different years, and then talk about what's in an application, what makes up an application. So the ninth grade year. So that is when students are first transitioning into high school. And so I know we have a really great mix of families in this group. So there are student families with students who are in ninth grade, even eighth grade, I think I saw, and then all the way through. So I'd want to make sure that I run through all of the years. In ninth grade, students are just getting their feet wet in high school level rigor. So they are starting to get interested in different topics. So the pressure shouldn't be on too much on students yet to really know what their path is, but I think this is a great opportunity for students to explore, try new things, and see where their passions might lie. It's also an opportunity for students to begin developing relationships with their teachers, with their peers, with their advisors, so that they can have a strong foundation and a strong network of support as they're building out their high school years. This is also a pivotal year in terms of the development of executive functioning skills, as I mentioned. So like I said in the beginning, I'll do a little bit of a surface graze over some educational psychology, which is, a real passion of mine, especially from graduate school, but I think it's also really helpful for parents to think about in the college process. So I'll do a little bit of an interactive activity now. So what qualities do you think make a college student successful? If I could just get a few answers in the chat. So understanding of time management, independent thinking, thank you so much. I think those are two key ones, self-starting, taking initiative, definitely. I'll pull up a few that I've also, thought about as well. So we have, independence, confidence, determination, motivation, self-advocacy, self-awareness, resilience. These are all executive functioning skills. So we tend to think of these qualities as individual characteristics. Either someone is confident or they're not, they're motivated or they're not. But these are skills that are and can be developed over time. And so the Center for the Developing Child at Harvard defines executive functioning as, the mental processes that enable us to plan, focus, remember instructions, juggle multiple tasks successfully. So just like, an air traffic control system at a busy airport manages the arrivals and departures of many aircrafts, the brain needs to do that type of thinking, use that type of skill set to filter distractions, prioritize tasks, set and achieve goals, control impulses. So children are constantly developing, and they don't need to take an executive functioning class in order to be successful in these skills. But I think it's helpful for families to know that there are things that you can do to help your child cultivate these skills and provide opportunities for growth. And specifically in the ninth grade year, it's really important to think about, because this year is the pivotal transition when students are going through a growth spurt of executive functioning skills in three key areas. So between end of eighth grade and beginning of 10th grade, they are really developing their working memory, which governs our ability to retain and manipulate distinct pieces of information over short periods of time. So that's time management and goal setting. They're also developing their mental flexibility. So that helps us, sustain and shift attention to different demands and apply different rules to different settings. So that's thinking about focus and understanding context. I'm sure you've seen it in your own children. There may have been a time when your children were much younger, maybe they were 5 or 6, and they may overshare, or, you're at a dinner at a friend's house and they say, "This tastes bad," because they don't know that they shouldn't say something like that. But by the time they are 12 and 13, they have a stronger understanding of appropriateness or context, what they should say in different spaces. And that's, the skill of mental flexibility that they're developing over time. So young children are themselves, 24/7, but as adolescents develop, their sense of context is changing. So they're also developing their sense of context of themselves. So that's why they might be super chatty with their friends, but then suddenly be much more quiet at home, because they're starting to think about, who am I when I'm at home? Who am I when I'm at school? Who am I when I'm, playing my sport? So all of these things are really a part of that mental flexibility that students are developing. And then also self-control and emotional regulation. So this enables us to set priorities, resist impulsive actions or responses. And this skill is connected to understanding one's own feelings and, the concept that other people might feel differently. So the concept of empathy. So towards the end of this period, they're starting to reach the peak of their attentional capacity. So by 16, 17, so I know there's some parents of older students, 11th grade, 12th graders, they are starting to really be able to sustain their attention much longer. They'll be able to plan in different ways that younger adolescents, struggle with. I'm sure there are tons of studies about the impact of social media and Zoom on attentional capacity, but what's important to note is, what the brain is capable of at this time. So I share all this to say that I think sometimes adults, when you're seeing your child change in these adolescent years and you're trying to prepare them for college in the future, it can be challenging to know, what do I do, or what are these skills outside of the academic skills that they need? So I kind of wanted to outline that and then also present some types of resources that can be helpful to families as they're thinking about developing these skills. I also want to share that, sometimes as adults, we can perceive boredom or, an attitude, we can perceive adolescents' behavior in that way, but it's really a lack of clarity rather than a lack of caring. So adolescents are being presented with increasingly complex tasks, choices, and things that are not always clear. They hear you need to do well in school. Okay, but what does that mean? Does that mean getting an A in every class? If it does, how do you do that? Is it just by doing the homework? If it's more than doing the homework, what if you don't understand how to do the homework or what the other tasks are? And how does that task of doing homework fit into the other tasks that might be important, like making friends or, having time to do your, whatever their activities are outside of school. So these types of goals and tasks are complicated even for adults. And so it's really important to start to scaffold, how do we support students in developing those skills? And as a parent, there's a lot that you can do. So I'll go through a few of the ways that you can support the executive functioning skills. So the first is planning. So identifying planning tools and encouraging teens to write things down. So there are tons of studies that show that multitasking can feel productive. You feel like, wow, I'm doing so many things, but it actually doesn't work. And teens and adults are able to accomplish more when they are focusing on one task at a time. So it can also be really helpful to model goal setting and scheduling. So the way that you plan your own life, having your teen sit with you and see how you do it is really an underrated way of engaging teens in understanding how to schedule, setting consequences and sticking to them. I'm not a parent yet, so I think you all know better than I the challenges of setting consequences, but also the importance in terms of supporting students in developing independence. So they need to be able to weigh the consequences of individual decisions. So they, the consequences, if they're not consistent, then it's harder for the child to understand how to weigh it. And then I think something else that can be really supportive of executive functioning skills is sequencing. So helping and assisting students in creating their own goals. So I highlight assists because I think co-creation is key to engagement and motivation. If a student is told what their goals are, then they're explicit. Without their explicit consent, then they are less likely to be motivated to achieve them. Helping students balance priorities. So rather than setting the priorities for them, really making sure that they are understanding, okay, I'm struggling to balance my time here. What do I need to adjust in my schedule? And so walking them through how they can realign their priorities rather than realigning them, those priorities for them. So I'll tell a quick story. As I mentioned, outside of my role with Smart City Kids, I was also the director of admissions of a college preparatory program, and we work with students from 6th grade through college graduation. And so we had students at competitive high schools, at boarding schools, and we had one student at a boarding school who, at the end of the first semester, we received word that he was really struggling and had a combination of over 25 tardies and absences. And we were like, how can you be absent from school when you live there 20 times? And had we taken a more punitive approach and saying, look, you need to get to class, no excuses, we would have missed out on what turned out to be a pretty legitimate fear of asking for help from his teachers. So we were able to put him on a plan where he set his specific goals, and it wasn't just get your act together, but really, we set up a weekly meeting with a teacher that he trusted and, encouraged him to use his planner. And those were goals that were measurable and felt attainable. And we saw a complete shift in his behavior. So I provide that as an example of the ways in which families and teachers, can really support in developing that skill of sequencing. And then the last point that I'll bring up is metacognition and self-regulation. So reminding teens to monitor their behaviors, identify patterns. These are times when teens are going through emotional spirals, and sometimes adults can read them as overreactions, but it's really emblematic of an important stage in development, the ability to regulate one's own emotions and understand one's own feelings. So asking the child to explain how they feel and give space to listen without immediately going to advice. And you can repeat back what you're hearing, because sometimes it's helpful to hear what you've said from someone else, and that can help the child go through the problem on their own. And then lastly, providing space to talk about their thought processes when they experience challenges. So teenagers need space, and that doesn't just mean privacy, but that means they need airtime, so space to express how they feel and feel heard. So these are just some of the ways in which students can start to develop time management and autonomy in those 9th and 10th grade years, the skills that are going to be fundamental and formative for them in 11th grade, 12th grade, and beyond. So with that, I'll go into a deep dive of 10th grade. So diving into coursework. So it's really important for students to start to think about what their academic path is. And I don't like the idea that, their students are math people or science people or English people. You can be, multifaceted. However, there are interests that students will have. And so how do I, while still maintaining my strength in all of my subjects, how do I find what my passion is? So really taking advantage to the extent possible that students can, the course offerings that they have, and starting to think about how can they supplement their academics with outside extracurricular work, whether that's academic, classes, or it can be, hands-on learning opportunities. So in 10th grade is when they can start to think about reaching out for those opportunities. Pursuing a demanding curriculum. So I'll talk about this a little bit later, but colleges are looking for students that are taking advantage of the rigor in their schools. So each student is evaluated within the context of their school. So not compared to, just how many A's do you have, but based on what was available at your school, what types of classes did you take? And, were those the most challenging classes? Did you supplement some of the, regular track classes with honors classes or higher level classes, if those are offered at your school? Certainly at the most competitive colleges, those are the types of things that they're going to look at. And so in 10th grade is when they can start to set themselves up for those types of classes. There aren't that many schools that are offering, AP classes to 10th graders. But if a student wants to go towards an AP track, if they're interested in pursuing a language at a higher level, in 10th grade is when they want to start to have their eye on those types of classes. Developing extracurricular activities that with an eye towards leadership opportunities. So that means, students continuing to stay involved in what they're passionate about and starting to think about how can they gain skills beyond participation. So 9th grade is really a great time to explore and see what their interests are. And then 10th and 11th grade is starting to think about, whether it's, working towards becoming a leader on a sports team, working to develop initiatives if they're interested in, a debate club or business club or things like that. How can they start to exercise some leadership potential within those fields? Preparing for the PSAT, which is normally in April. And so students want to start thinking about standardized testing. I'll talk about that in a bit in terms of how the climate around standardized testing is changing almost, week to week, it seems. But we're not at a place where it's going to be completely thrown away. So I think it is still important for students to start thinking about how to prepare themselves for standardized testing when they have their eyes towards college. And then outlining summer goals. So after the 9th grade summer, colleges aren't really looking at what students are doing, or sorry, during the 9th grade summers, colleges aren't necessarily looking at what students are doing, but 10th, 11th grade, they are starting to think about how are students making use of the time that they have in the summers to engage in their extracurricular interests, in their academic passions. How are they using that time? So it's important for students to start thinking about different types of summer programs, internships, and opportunities that they can take advantage of. And then at the end of 10th grade, I would say developing a preliminary college list to begin researching. And I will say that college list of research should be really wide. So inevitably there are, when I say things like that, parents, they come up with a list that's, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, and those are the schools. I would say that's not necessarily a great place to start in the research phase, because you want to see the variety of of colleges, and to give the students a foundation to really understand where they might fit. So a large research university is going to feel incredibly different from a small liberal arts college. A school that has a pre-professional program, so a business school or a law school, or if they have a business school or law school and they have a pre-professional program and pre-professional track, that's going to feel a little bit different than colleges that have open curriculum. So having a range of different types of schools that students can just start to do research, when it's possible, again, visiting those physical universities on college tours. But for right now, the virtual tours, I would say this is a perfect time to do virtual tours, because all the colleges have really had to step up their game in this virtual space. So this is a really great chance for students to really get a strong understanding of what's out there, and is low stakes. It doesn't take much time to go on a school's website, even if it's not a school you end up applying to. And it's also important for students to start thinking about demonstrating interest. And what that means is registering for the different information sessions and demonstrating you're interested in different colleges. For the top 10 schools, they don't track that so much. They assume that the people who are applying want to go. But I would say for many other universities, they do track whether students are opening their emails, whether students are attending the virtual sessions, whether they are attending webinars and workshops, because it demonstrates, wow, this person is really interested in this school. So even starting in 10th, 11th grade, those are important things to start thinking about for students and for parents. In 11th grade is when students should really hone in on their course of study. So this will be the most
stress me out.
I know for parents of 11th graders, I know there are a few in the chat. I'm sure you're seeing it now. The workload is increasing. There are, more demands in the higher level courses, as well as just more homework overall. They might be taking on more leadership opportunities in their extracurriculars. So they're having to balance all these things, which is when those executive functioning skills I was talking about really come into play. So it's important for students to start to think about, how can I really, balance my time and focus during this year. Planning for standardized testing. So the different standardized tests currently are the SAT, ACT, and the SAT subject test. I say currently because, like I said, the college admissions space is really changing quite rapidly because of COVID. So I don't anticipate they'll do away with these tests in the next 4 years, but there could be a new test that comes up. And there also could be, more universities that decide to go test optional or even test blind. I'll talk about what that means in a minute. That said, we are still in a space where many schools are either requiring them or having them as an option. So I think it's important for families to still consider what a testing plan would look like for their child, because there are students that are great test takers or can really do quite well on these tests. And so if they're applying to schools that are test optional, that could be a great way to highlight their strengths. So I wouldn't say that standardized testing is, necessarily always something to push to the side. Grades are definitely more significant. So students should spend the majority of their time focusing on, strengthening their grades and focusing on their transcript. But when colleges and universities are evaluating, dozens of thousands of applications from all over the world, standardized testing is a way that universities have been using, or it's a method that universities have been using to really understand how people are performing more broadly. That said, the data show, over and over that standardized testing is most strongly correlated with socioeconomic status and the ability to pay for the resources to study for tests. So that's why you're seeing, beyond COVID, kind of a less of a reliance on standardized testing and more of an emphasis on grades. But like I said, until all the colleges go away with them completely, I think it's important for families to be aware of the multiple options there are to demonstrate a student's strengths. Planning on visiting colleges during, vacations, I think is a really great thing to start to do in 11th grade as well. For the families that have younger children, hopefully by the time they're in 11th grade, we'll be able to move a little bit more freely and visit in person. For folks who have children who are in 11th grade, there are some campuses that are open to taking visitors. So if that's comfortable for you and your family, that could be a nice option to see a campus. But otherwise, like I said, the virtual tours classes have really improved. Since I was applying to college many years ago, that was not an option at all. And so it's really exciting to see the ways that students can get to know schools and in a robust way. So it's not just, a scan of the library, but you have an opportunity in these virtual tours to really learn about school traditions, understand the culture, sometimes even ask Q&A with students as well as admissions officers. So I think that's a really great way for families to get to know different colleges. It's also important to secure summer plans. So in the 11th grade year, starting to think about leadership opportunities or skill development is crucial in that summer. So whether they are summer programs that students can really hone in on an academic interest, or an opportunity to develop leadership or internship skills, work experience, it's really important for students to utilize their summers to really grow in ways that perhaps they might not have time to in the academic year, or in different ways than what they have exposure to in the academic year. And that's what colleges are looking for, that to the extent possible, students are making use of their time to learn and grow academically and non-academically. And then that other piece, so identifying teachers to write letters of recommendation. Of course, it's important for students to do well in their classes, but their grades don't tell the full picture. So, admissions officers are looking at how do the people who get to know them really well in the classroom every day see how they show up in the classroom, what do they have to say about their work. And so it's important for students to start to really think about what are the classes that I did well in, and who are the teachers that I had a chance to really get to know. Most colleges will be looking for recommendations from full year-long classes, and 11th grade is the best, but 10th grade, if it was a really great class or a particular relationship in which maybe your English teacher is also your debate coach or something like that. If it's a 12th grade teacher, I would say, since they would only know you for the first half of the first semester when you're applying to college, that's not necessarily recommended. So I would really encourage students or parents who have students in the 11th grade to encourage your children to start thinking about, who are the teachers that you feel connected to, and towards the end of the spring, starting to reach out to them about writing letters of recommendation in the fall, and strengthening that relationship. And then at the end of 11th grade, really starting to evaluate that preliminary college list that you might have been working on throughout the year after visiting different schools, to start thinking about, what are the colleges that I really feel passionate about. Maybe if there are any remaining trips that you want to do to see campuses, and then also to begin to prepare your applications in the summer months. As a college consultant, this is something that we really support our students with over the summer and getting started, because on their own, they say they'll start, but they do not. And then they wait for the fall, and then it's really challenging sometimes to balance, a really high course load in 12th grade and all their college applications. So we always encourage students, get started early. Even if you just have one essay done in the summer, that's a huge accomplishment, because that's one less essay that you'll have to write in the fall when things really do ramp up. So in 12th grade, students will continue pursuing a demanding curriculum, taking the highest level classes that are available, and supplementing, the limited free time they might have with their other areas of interest. It's important to stay active in those extracurricular activities, stepping into leadership roles, and then solidifying that college list. So it's important for students to think about the different types of admission plans that are offered. And so there are two main decision plans, so either early decision or regular decision, and different types of requirements based on when students apply. So with early decision, it's binding, meaning that if students apply early, they are committed to going to that school. And they aren't able to weigh their options and apply to other schools, in the regular decision time. The normal application date for early decision is normally November 1st, November 15th. Some schools it's a little bit earlier, very few are a little bit later. And then there's also early action, which is non-binding, which means that students can apply to multiple schools early. They will receive a decision earlier in the year, but they still have the chance to apply to other schools. And so based on, one, what's the student's priority? If they really are excited about a school and they know that it's their top choice, applying early decision can put them at a competitive advantage. One, the admissions officers see their application earlier in the process, but then also many schools do weight the early decision a little bit higher. So the acceptance rate might be a little bit higher in the early process. So it is something that can be to a student's advantage to apply early, but one, if it's binding, they don't have the chance to weigh their other options. And then it's also students need to make sure that their application is at its strongest point if they apply early. Maybe they had a rockier 11th grade spring semester. And so having an additional full semester of senior year grades might be beneficial for that student. And so waiting to apply regular when they have more grades to send might be the best choice. So I don't necessarily universally suggest early decision or early action. It really depends on the student, but it is important for students and families to be aware of those different decision timelines. And then also there is regular decision, in which there are no restrictions in terms of the number of schools that you can apply to, and it's non-binding there. So when you get into one school regular decision, you can get into other schools as well, and you don't necessarily have to commit to that one school that you got into first, but you're really able to weigh your options there. The deadlines are usually January 1st through February 15th. So there's about a month timing for regular decision applications. So then students will need to work on all those applications in their 12th grade year. So certainly writing essays, I think, is what's most familiar, and standardized testing. And then of course, there's the teacher recommendations, and there's also the school profile. So that's not something that the students send, but it's something that parents should be aware of. That's a part of the application. So as I mentioned, each student is evaluated within their context, which means that a profile of the school will be sent with the application, in which the guidance counselor will indicate, this is the class size, these are the number of college college level courses or AP courses or honors courses that are offered at this school, and this is how to read this transcript. So it's important for families to be aware that this is also included in the application, because one, it might be something you want to look into now. Can I see this? Can I see my child's or the school's school profile? So I have an understanding of what is available at the school if you don't know already, and then also how the student's application will really match up based on what the profile suggests. So that's a part of the application. And then, the fall of the senior year is really getting all of those pieces together. So I will talk a little bit about my experience reading applications as an admissions officer. So the first thing is, even though we know a ton of time goes into compiling that application, it's 4 years of work that's going into that, and we want to honor the work that students do. We also had very little time. We had to read thousands of applications, and it was, high pressure, which means that it's a holistic review in 15 minutes. So you have to get through all of that information that I talked about in a really short amount of time. So it's really important for students to be aware that, with your essays, it's important to be concise and to really, pack in a lot of information, but it's also important to have a perspective. You want to make sure that your point of view, your perspective, who you are as a student is coming through. And so I often share with students, you don't have to suggest that you're perfect at everything and you love every single discipline and, all of your extracurriculars are equally important to you, because you want them to come away with an understanding of who you are. So if there are 4 values that are important to you, 2 activities that are really great, and then, hopefully you're doing well in most of your classes, but 2 classes that are really core to what you want to do in the future, that's what you want the admissions officer to come away with, the holistic view of who you are and a perspective and a point of view. Context matters. So I've been talking about that a few times, and I like this image because, if you're the person on the top right, you have no idea what you're looking at, right? You're only seeing a little piece. You might think that's a mountain or something. But if you're the person on the bottom left, you might have a better understanding of what you're looking at. But it really depends on your perspective. And it's the same kind of thing with a college application. Depending on how much information is within that application and this the context that the student provides, certainly in their essays and everything, that'll help the admissions officer evaluate where the student is how they're performing, and then also what their passions and their interests are. So context is really important. Students are being evaluated based on the context that they are within in their school, within their neighborhood and environment, not so broadly. So it's not, a student from New York City being compared to a student from London or from Nigeria or something like that, but a student within New York City, based on the resources and opportunities that they had, how are they taking advantage of those resources and opportunities? It's also important to note the weight of academic markers. So while there's a lot of information that goes into a college application, it's not all created equal, so to speak. So first and foremost, the transcript is the most important thing. So the grades from 9th grade to 12th grade are what they're going to weight most heavily, because it's 4 years of information. So standardized testing, even if a student, takes 2 or 3 subject tests as well as the SAT, it's still only how a student performed on one Saturday at a testing center. So the 4 years of grades are really the most important. And on top of that, they're also looking at the rigor. So what are the types of classes that students are taking? And then, standardized testing does come into play to really supplement the academic information that they get from the transcript. And then lastly, the other key piece is the perspective on the non-academic markers. So how is the student taking advantage of the extracurricular opportunities at their school, and how are they diving into their interests? So they are weighing all of those pieces, like I said, in 15 minutes or less sometimes. So it's a lot of information, but they really want to get a great snapshot of the student. So I will transition to what I think most people have been most nervous about in these last couple of months, college admissions and COVID. So things have changed so much because of the pandemic, and a lot of it has been really challenging for families and for students to go through. But I also think there are opportunities that have come out of this time, and for families, especially for families with a little bit younger children, you have time to adjust. For folks that are in the 11th grade year, I know there's a lot of uncertainty that's challenging, but even within the last 6 months, I think there have been some clarity and some breakthroughs that will, make it a little bit easier for your children to apply than even the folks who were applying last year. One of the things that has been challenging, but I think there is a piece of opportunity, is the changes in testing. So over 200 universities became test optional in the last year. So there were several universities, I would say it was probably about 50 universities that were test optional before COVID, but because of the challenges in and the safety concerns of taking in-person tests, being able to offer a fair, equitable, and safe test virtually. Because of that, universities were really responding by becoming test optional, which means that students could submit standardized testing if they wanted to, but they didn't have to, and it wouldn't be held against them in the admissions process. So, more information can be helpful, but the admissions offices were really committing to equitable reads and not advantaging students just because they had test scores. The time will tell whether, how those decisions are really made, because, for any folks who might have children who are in 12th grade right now will know that most of the decisions for regular decision haven't come out yet. So we will see, what is the percentage of students at these different competitive schools that were accepted without standardized testing. That said, because there were many universities that already had test optional policies, I think that there was a precedent set for how universities would be able to make those evaluations. And so I don't think that it's going to be that, even though they said test optional, they're actually only admitting students that only had test scores. I really do think we'll see an interesting spread, but we don't have those numbers quite yet. So that's to be determined. There are some schools that have become test blind, mostly the California colleges. So the UC system, so University of California, that includes UCLA, Berkeley, UC Irvine, Santa Cruz, etc. All of those colleges have decided that they are not accepting standardized testing at all. So that meant that they, wanted to have a truly equitable playing field. So they didn't want to advantage students who took the test at all, or in any capacity. And so it's a pretty interesting and bold move, but it's not, certainly just a reaction for COVID. From COVID. The test optional policies have been around for many years. There's been a lot of data investigating the validity of standardized testing. So this was a long time coming in a lot of ways, but it was pretty bold, I think, and exciting for some of these colleges to take that stance. I will say that means that many colleges across the board have seen a big boost in the number of applications that they've received, and the number of spots has not increased. So we, for students applying next year and the years that follow, they can expect that it will be very competitive, but I think there's also an opportunity for students who maybe standardized testing is not their strength, for them to be competitive in a new way because of the changing policies. So I would say it's a little bit of a mixed bag, definitely some positive results of this, but also some challenges that might arise as well. In terms of gap years and the impact on future enrollment, there are a lot of students who were accepted last year who decided to defer their fall enrollment to wait for an opportunity to be able to be on campus in person, because so many colleges and universities were remote in the fall of 2020. So as an example, 20% of the incoming first years deferred admission at Yale, and some of the other competitive universities are, between 10 and 20%. And so, 100 is not a normal class size, but I'll use that for, the ease of the numbers. So if you have a class of 100 students and 20% of them are deferring admission, that means there are only 80 spots left for the next year, because those 20% of students are coming back. So not as much of a concern, I would say, for the folks that are applying next year and the year after, but it would be interesting to see the residual impact of that gap year trend, especially because we still don't quite know whether universities will be open, in their normal kind of circumstances in the fall of 2021. So will there be lots more students of 2021 that defer into next year? It's unclear. So there's nothing I think that parents can do to change those circumstances, but I think it's something to be aware of in terms of the level of competition that's coming up in the years. I think what's also come up during this tumultuous year is the ways in which summer programs and summer plans were affected by COVID. There were so many students that weren't able to participate in their internships or summer programming in the summer of 2020 the way they expected because of COVID. And so in terms of a positive, I think there's been a real rise in really comprehensive and robust virtual programming. I think so many opportunities and organizations knew that they had to be able to adjust. And so I think that won't be an issue in the same way that it was maybe for the students from last year. But it is something to consider. As I know that there are several parents of 11th graders. I'm not sure what you feel your comfort level is with your child doing an in-person internship or something like that. I think it's important to think about, but it's also important to, do what feels safe and comfortable for you and your family. So I won't say that summer programs are no longer important. I think they are still important, but I also think that thinking about ways to engage virtually will be really helpful for students, especially in this transition year when we're still adjusting and still figuring out the reaction to the pandemic. And then broader concerns in higher education that have come out of, college admissions and COVID, and the relationship between COVID and college admissions. I'd say generally the safety and health of students. We're still not sure what the fall is going to look like in 2021, whether colleges and universities will all be, open in the way that they normally are. I think that because of the development of the vaccines, there's a lot of hope that they might, but it's still a little bit uncertain. And I think just thinking about what safety and health looks like has changed. When I was going to college, and I'm sure many parents as well, you might have been in a triple where there were 3 people in one bunk bed and a single bed or something like that. And I think even the dorm setup is being reconsidered because of the safety and health of students. So it's just interesting to see how might that impact the way that colleges are thinking about recruitment, thinking about the number of beds that they have on campus, and how they can make sure that students will have a safe and positive academic experience in college. And then also the academic preparation and addressing learning gaps. I think we've all seen that there have been some ways in which virtual learning has provided opportunities for students, but also ways in which it's been really, really challenging on students. And so there are some gaps, maybe in content that students weren't able to overcome because of the challenges of the year. So how might the expectations of admissions officers and universities shift slightly, knowing that maybe students might need a little bit more preparation coming into their freshman year than they had in the past. So I raise these trends not to offer so many, definitive solutions, but ideas that are out there that as, time goes on in this kind of tumultuous year, you can start to investigate and think about, what might this mean for the fall. I'll provide a few resources in my last slide that can be helpful as you're navigating this journey, whether you are the parent of an 8th or 9th grader just getting started, or the parent of an 11th grader who's really about to dive into the process. Here are a few websites where you can engage in different types of virtual and college tours. You can start to get to know different colleges and really filter based on not just academic interests, but other types of interests that might be important for your child, whether that's the culture fit of the school, maybe there are different accessibility needs that your child needs, what the extracurricular opportunities are available at these schools. So I really like these websites because it's not just about the US News rankings, but it's really about experience and fit. I think they provide a really robust understanding of the different types of college opportunities that are out there. I see in the chat, someone asked if we'll be able to email this deck. So it will be available afterwards. And I hope that you find these resources helpful. So that was a lot of talking for me. This has been my biggest adjustment when I'm doing workshops. Normally I'm in person and I'm interactive, so it's a little bit different to talk to the virtual screen, but I hope that you found this helpful, and it's been really great to join you all and share this information. So I'll stop there. Are there any questions about any of the things that I've talked about so far?
Danielle, I think you must have answered everything anyone could possibly be wondering. Any questions?
I guess I'll keep it on this slide if this is not set.
Hi, Danielle and Erica. It's Amy Goldstein. I'm Charlene Bodner's co-chair at the Religious School Parent Network. I just wanted to say good evening and thank you for joining us. I know Charlene kicks off the evening and we're tag teaming tonight. We wanted to give a big thank you to you both and to Smart City Kids. It was a pleasure meeting you, Danielle.
Yes, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Very interesting. I'm the parent of a college freshman, so I'm taking a pause, and I'll be back at this game in a couple of years. But your value, especially as a former admissions officer, was really very interesting to listen to. And I think I will keep remembering when you said 4 years and 15 minutes. Boy, oh boy.
Yeah.
Actually, Danielle, Amy, a question just popped in, and I know we have just a couple of minutes left, but Danielle, I don't know if you could briefly touch on sports recruiting during the pandemic, and that's coming from the parent of a junior.
Yes. So I'll be honest and say that's not my expertise, sports recruiting. So I don't have too many answers beyond I know it must be very challenging. I think that in the recruitment process, it's still really important to foster connection with the coaches first. I think that sometimes in recruiting, folks think that they need to go through the admissions office, but it's really the coaches that are advocating on behalf of the students within the admissions team. So I think that's really significant for families to note. But in terms of how the pandemic has affected, especially for sports that haven't been able to practice because of social distancing, I'm not quite sure. So I'm sorry I don't have more answers there.
Well, it looks like I don't know that there are many other questions. So I also just want to thank Kol Ami for inviting us to present this evening, and thank Danielle for her expertise and all of her knowledge, and her passion and enthusiasm for the subject is very clear. And as I mentioned earlier on in the evening, if anyone needs us for any reason, if you work for a corporation who might benefit from a parenting workshop, we do everything from executive function workshops to expecting a new parent workshops. and also, as I mentioned, to have a robust group of tutors. So if anyone needs us, please don't hesitate. I can be reached easily through the Kol Ami community. And I think I just saw Pam Pass join us back again. So I don't know, I'll turn it back over to Amy to wrap us up for the evening, but thank you again so much for hosting us, and to Danielle for the presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. And as Erica said, any questions, please feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And everyone will be getting a link to the recording of the workshop. Have a good night, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Erica. Thanks for organizing. And
Absolutely. You're amazing, Danielle.
have a good one.
You are, Danielle. That was terrific. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks to you too, Erica.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.